Well, we're back with another one, Not an Accident podcast. So I'm always excited for every episode, man. But Andrew, Duncan, the Duncan Duo. I'm not trying to date you or anything like that, but I've seen you for many years on billboards.
20 years,
Yeah, Tampa Bay. You have your radio show, your content. I mean, you're probably one of the most, humbly, one of the most well-known real estate professionals in Tampa Bay.
Thank you.
So it is truly an honor to have you.
Awesome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and I told a couple people, like, they would ask, like, who's the guest this time and stuff like that. And they were like, I know that guy. You never know sometimes because it's like that Tampa celebrity kind of deal. So yeah, man, excited to have you. You're a real estate professional, but I mean, it runs deep. I mean, you're in marketing, you're in sales, you're doing like kind of all aspects of real estate. So let's start from the beginning, give everybody a little bit of context. So how did you start in the real estate business?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and had middle class, hardworking parents. Didn't grow up with a lot of money, and went to college. I actually am a Division I college basketball player, so that was kind of my first love, where I got like my competitive juices. And so after college, I took a trip to see my parents, and I ended up in Ybor City. And in Indiana, where I grew up,
hopefully during the day and not at night.
No, it was a night. I was young, so now I don't go to Ybor City. But so nonetheless, showed up at Ybor City, and I grew up in a really small town where you were lucky if your girlfriend had teeth. Yeah. So when I went out to Ybor City, it's like I see all these beautiful women. I'm like, I'm moving here. So my first 5 years of living here, I worked for a Fortune 500 company out of St. Pete. I was a salesperson. That was my background. That was my competitive juices. Kind of.
So we're talking the early 2000s.
Correct. Yeah. Early 2000s, crushed it. And then the company was bought out. The last couple of years I was there, I bought rental properties. Okay. And I would meet real estate agents, and I would say, man, I could do this. And they got a nicer car than me.
Yeah. I want to take a step back. So how did you think to buy rental properties even back then? Because that was not a thing for just normal working
I had
folk.
a couple of friends that had done it at a high level and done really well. I had some mentors in college that were real estate investors. And the crazy part is I was really frugal, and I was making way more money than I was going to spend at this point. So I was like, okay, where should I invest it? What am I going to do? And I just kind of happened across real estate and did well with it. And as I met real estate agents, I was like, oh man, I'd really like to do that someday. And of course, the day came when the company I worked for was bought out. It was bought out by a larger company, and everything massively changed. The culture, the pay scale, everything, right? And so shortly thereafter, I left, and then that's when I jumped full time into real estate.
So you were...
That was 2005-ish, yeah.
Okay. And this is when houses, you could probably buy a house in Tampa for what, 30, 40 grand?
You could buy some, definitely. Yeah. Depending on the neighborhood, of course. I'm not buying Bayshore for 30 grand, but yeah, I would, and I bought a lot of rental property in Pinellas specifically in like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 and, making great returns. And it just got to the point where I was so busy with the rental properties, and the company I was with was kind of, like I said, it was winding down because it got bought out. There were people leaving. It was kind of compacting, and so I fell in love with real estate, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go get my license, and that's pretty much how I started.
So were you doing your day job during the day, and then basically acquiring and dealing with these properties? Even so, the two job situation.
Correct. Yeah, weekends, evenings, that kind of stuff. Dealing with renters, and the toilet's broken, and this, that, and the other. And so I did that, and I continued doing that. Obviously throughout my real estate career, I've continued investing and buying and selling and having rentals and commercial properties. So that trend has continued, but that's what really got me started to be an agent.
So I think this is a big point for a lot of our audience, and something I haven't talked with in some guests, and it's scaling, because I know that's very big. A lot of real estate professionals, they're fantastic, real estate professionals, Correct. But at the end of the day, if you really want to do something, it's scaling, hiring a team and having people, not only training people, but having them grow with you. So when did you realize that you started to need help or needed people to, go through this journey with you?
Yeah. So 2007 was the first year that I made six figures in real estate. My first year in 2005, I sold one property. It was my parents. Like they bought like a house in Hudson. It shouldn't even really count. But so the second year I started
as an attorney, I made $12,000.
Yeah.
So I get it. Everybody has that story.
I was a loss. I was literally a loss. So nonetheless, by year three, I'd started figuring it out. I was a good salesperson. I knew how to generate generate some business. I was using a lot of the free stuff, open houses, Craigslist ads, basically anything I could do to generate inquiries that didn't cost money, because I didn't have a marketing or advertising budget. Met my ex-wife about then, and she was excellent at operations, and she was working for Bank of America at the time and was pretty burned out, didn't love her job. And I was getting close to hiring an assistant. She said, you know what, maybe I should just come and join you. So my first team member was my ex-wife, and that was 2007, 2008. And then from there, it was almost like a doubling every year. Like, I was great at sales and marketing. She was the operations person, and it just grew. And I think we were able to, kind of stay in our own lanes in our business and grow it that way. And so it started with just, hiring, her starting as an admin person. And then it was, okay, our first salesperson. Then it was another salesperson. And I think by probably 10, we'd hired a coach. We started spending money on radio. That was my first foray into media, was radio. And then from there, it just, like I said, it just kept growing. And people would sometimes say, like, even today, it's like, oh, an overnight success. It was like, no, it was through those early years, it was a grind. There were years where I was losing money, where I was investing more than I was making. And I think as you scale sometimes from being a well-paid salesperson to a business owner, you have a little bit of a period where you may not make as much, but it's what you have to do to get it to a point where you can have a better quality of life.
Absolutely. So when you were first hiring these initial people, obviously it was probably your first time hiring people, and especially hiring for your own company.
Correct.
Nonetheless. So how did that change the attributes that you were looking in your salespeople? Because obviously I would imagine that would evolve over time, because you knew what you were looking for.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, so we did hire a coach. We hired a business coach that had experience in real estate. And he gave us a lot of tools and systems to help us interview and help us identify. It was a challenge at first, because I was really good at sales, but I wasn't great at necessarily understanding or interviewing and identifying talent. And so I made a lot of mistakes in the early days with hiring people that probably weren't motivated and weren't going to be great salespeople. But I think probably by 11 or 12, I had a really good system where I knew what I wanted. I knew the personality profile that I wanted. I knew kind of the agent profile, and I got really good at identifying talent, not just from people that would reply to an ad, but people that I would meet, and I would say, hey, I think you should be in real estate. And still today, I have several people that are friends of mine from decade plus ago that I said, hey, look, you should be in real estate. And so I think it started to grow from there, and then we started growing an ad budget. And the more we grew an ad budget, the more it was easier to attract and get agents and people interested in working for us, because they'd see our ads everywhere.
And you were creating a brand.
Correct. That's it.
So, and you mentioned radio and the ads.
Yeah.
That's very, or rather not typical for, a real estate agent or professional or anything like that, or even a team for that matter, to start advertising. I mean, I saw it very rarely. Most of the time, real estate agents, and correct me if I'm wrong, are kind of, word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth, farming. Farming, word of mouth, postcards, past clients. And I think for me, I knew I didn't have, because I was still relatively young and I still was growing. And I wanted to go where other people weren't. I studied marketing in college. So I'd always been kind of a marketing junkie and started paying attention to trends. And I realized there was nobody on media. And I think part of the reason was it's expensive and it takes a while before you start getting results. So, I committed to it. I had a media agent that helped me and, kind of came up with the right calls to action. And so I would say by month 3 or 4, I realized it was going to work. And then from there, it was that several year period, it was a lot of radio. It was multiple stations. It was, we started with one and then we grew it to multiple stations. And it eventually transitioned into TV, billboards, the lightning. But it started in the early years with one radio show, like one show that we would run ads on. And then from there, it kind of compounded into more once it started being successful. And I think after month 3 or 4, we had enough impressions to that audience that if you listened to that station, you knew who we were.
That's amazing. And, I tell a lot of people when they ask me about like marketing, especially in the legal industry, when you're doing billboards and TV and radio and those, big boy commitments, I like to call them, or big girl commitments is 2024. Big people commitments.
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
you got to be making a 6 to 12 month commitment. I really feel like
100%.
It's not just like, oh, let me throw up a digital billboard this month. Like,
right. No, it doesn't work like that. And I found through the years, and obviously radio isn't as powerful as it used to be. People have gone to podcasts and Spotify and streaming. And back then you didn't have as many of those things. So radio was more powerful then than it is today.
Options were limited.
Yeah. So, and there were no real estate advertisers really. I mean, there was no major hedge funds, there were no iBuyers. There was really like, I was it, I had a long run where no one else was really competing with me from a real estate agent or brokerage standpoint.
Oh, I'm sure the radio station was like, you're want to advertise with us?
Yeah, it was definitely surprising.
As a real estate agent?
And it started with a small budget, and then as it worked, it just kept growing, and it would be like, okay, now we're spending on this station, now we're going to add another one, and then we're going to add another one. And so, what I think what attracted me to it was we started with celebrity endorsements. And see, no one really knew who I was at that point, right? So I don't really use many celebrity endorsements anymore. Mostly I speak the ads or I'm on TV simply because I've done enough of it to where I've built a brand enough to where I can kind of be the face of the company. Back then,
you kind of are the celebrity.
Yeah. And back then I was not. Like back then I was completely uncomfortable in front of a camera. I didn't have that same, charisma that I have now through lots of training and doing speaking. And so a celebrity endorsement was really effective because it woke people up and it kind of aligned you to their audience. And so I started with that. And then as that grew, again, we had 3 or 4 of them. And then it just kind of compounded to the point where at one point I didn't need the celebrity endorsements anymore. It was like, I'm just going to cut my own spots. And so that's kind of how it transitioned. But it was, I wanted to be where people weren't, where other advertisers weren't, and where it was cost prohibitive. So if it started working well, an agent that would be able to compete with me would have to have such a large ad budget that they wouldn't do it or they wouldn't stick. And through the years, there were plenty of times, both the radio and TV, that I would see real estate agents go on and they were hit it and quit it. They were out in a month.
Just because they didn't have the ad spend.
Couldn't spend it. Yeah.
What was it? So many questions with that. I want to start. Number one, sponsoring the Lightning. Like, what did that feel like when you would walk into like Emily and like
your names everywhere?
That's my company.
It was a little. Honestly, it was a little
company
weird. It was a little weird. Like when the LED wrap would throw up there and then put the name up there, like on the jumbotron, it has the replay swipe with like my logo. The first few times it was a little weird, and people around me, like in the section, would like talk to me and be like, "Hey, can I? Like that's really cool. That's your stuff." And so it started really organically. We had a client that worked for the Lightning, and she kind of said, "Hey, look, I want somebody from the marketing department to talk to you. I think there could be something there." And that was really how it started. It was, we sold a home for someone that worked for the Lightning, and then it just kind of turned into, I'm already advertising in a lot of places. What would a deal with the Lightning look like? And I think we're 9 years in. I think it's going to be my 9th year with them. So
that's incredible. Cool. And congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So with that, and maybe this is kind of a multifaceted question, so don't feel like you have to answer just in relation to marketing or anything like that. As far as the success that you've had in business, was there any moment when you were kind of like, I made it, or we've really built something here? Like you looked around, you're like, wow.
I think I would probably say the first 10 years of my business, I really just kept my head down. And like, I worked like crazy to the detriment of some other things in my life. But truthfully, I grinded, like I worked hard, and I did my best not to pay attention to a lot of it. But when we started hitting like Real Trends rankings and being ranked in like the top 10 in the brokerages, and then when I would go places and people would recognize me or ask for a picture with me, which was really freaking weird. I'm like, awesome. I sell houses, but I would say that was probably the point when I was like, okay, this is something special. And then of course, I think the first 10 years, I really lived, below my means, reinvested everything in the business. The second 10 years, I've been able to enjoy it a little bit more. So I think, buying and building my dream home, dream cars, things like that were obviously kind of, look, Mom, I made it moments. But I would say like, the probably near the end of that first 10-year segment of my career, when the notoriety started happening, when those multiplying those impressions over and over and over again led to being recognized and people wanting to talk to me and, solicitors. And, I still get tons of solicitors. And in fact, I had a solicitor this week send me they wanted to get a meeting with me, and they sent me a signed basketball jersey of one of my favorite players to my house to try and get a meeting with me, which I thought was like, that's impressive. Like, they're going to get a meeting. Like, that's impressive. So if you're listening and you want a meeting with me, I love gifts.
Yeah, there you go. That's both amazing, and I'm very creeped out, but I'm kind of
a little weird, but I was like, hey, I'm going to go with it. Yeah. So they did their homework, which I actually appreciated. We'll do that sometimes to try and get business from somebody. We'll do those creative things. So as a salesperson, I appreciated it more than anything. It's not hard to figure out where people live today. So it's, and I mean, I've put my house on social media. So it's not like I was really creeped out at all. It was actually, quite intuitive. It was smart.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And tell me, we'll circle back real quick with the marketing. Mm-hmm. You said obviously it continued to increase. My first question with that is, how did you figure out what you were going to budget for marketing? Because you said you were scaling your lifestyle back. You weren't exactly enjoying the fruit and the labor.
I think
your labor.
Honestly, I think the first several years I was spending pretty much. We had enough to cover our bills, and outside of that, it was like pouring right.
So
back
you were pot committed, like you
literally,
were in
there.
Yeah,
it was heavy,
okay.
and so like I said, I mean, it was a period of time where I just I drove a BMW, a 2001 BMW 540i for years. Didn't love the car, but it was a great real estate car. I wanted other cool toys, and so I would say, like I said, that near that 10-year mark is where I started to kind of get back to like like the cars and nicer stuff, but for the first 10 years, I was literally pouring almost everything back in, and not profiting the same that I do today. And now I have a budget. I have a line item that says how much am I going to spend on marketing. I keep it to a certain percentage, and then obviously I kind of gauge my marketing based on company volume and revenue.
When you were building through those years and you said, you finally got to enjoy, again, some of the fruits of your labor, was that in the back of your mind? Like, I'm doing this for these goals? Like, did you have specific
100%.
goals? Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Dream board, pictures of cars I wanted, pictures of houses. My company still today does a dream board exercise every year where we all get together and we share our dream boards with each other. So I definitely had a vision that, like I wanted to get to a point where I spent years living like below to where I could get to a point where I was like, okay, now I can take Fridays off. Now I can take time off. I can take a month to go off on a vacation. And so the plan definitely was to buy my time, to buy freedom. And of course, to enjoy some of the things that I, as a kid, dream cars, dream house, that kind of stuff. So, and it's funny because like, I'm not like a really flashy dresser. Like I don't have expensive suits. I wear AJ1s almost like every day. I don't have like a cool watch. It's just not my style, but cars and houses obviously are my thing.
Of course. So. And, the AJ1s are kind of the like business.
They have become that. So I remember probably in 2015, 2016, I went to the Oscars. And the Oscars, won it in a charity auction and went to the Oscars, and everyone wore suits. And I decided I was going to wear suits with Jordans. And it was in LA. And I remember being scolded by everyone I knew that it was so unprofessional and you need to have dress shoes. And when I got there, it was in LA and everyone practically was wearing them. I was like, okay, this trend is coming. And it's compounded now to where, Jordans in a suit are perfectly acceptable.
Most of my friends, like the business entrepreneur outfit is literally like, a knit polo shirt or, a dry fit polo shirt, some type of like, kind of sport pant, kind of khaki and Jordan 1s. Yep. I mean, that's kind of the kit these days. Yep.
And I would say if I'm meeting with a client or doing, like a TV commercial or something, I'll wear a suit. But most of the time,
you dress for your audience.
Yeah. Most of the time, even in the office, I'm in jeans, t-shirt, ball cap. That's pretty much what I'll do. Unless, of course, like I said, I've got a client coming in or I've gotten to the point where I don't really, care as much about someone's impression of me, which is kind of freeing. So I can just be myself.
With saying that, like, how important do you think transparency is in real estate at this point? I know that's kind of significant shifting, but I want to talk about that. So you just said, I obviously you care to an extent, but at the end of the day, right. It's not going to make or break, your life.
Yeah.
how do you maintain expectations? How do you maintain that transparency? Because obviously, we see the TV shows and the $1 million listings and stuff like that.
Yes.
And somebody has these unrealistic expectations. So first, let's talk about how do you vet that out? And then secondarily, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think so the reality TV shows, what's funny is I'm friends with some of those guys from before they were even like famous. Like I was in mastermind groups with several of them that are on TV now. And so they can tell you just as much as anyone else that most of it's fake and staged. And so I think it's a matter of, again, like recognizing your client and kind of dressing to the client. And I don't meet with as many clients anymore, which is probably part of the reason why I can, if I was, then it would be a little bit different. But ultimately it's making sure that they understand that that's not realistic. That's not how a transaction happens. And what I found too is that because we do attract a good amount of entrepreneurs, most of them are they're just like you said. I mean, they don't have an expectation in Tampa, Florida when it's 94 out that I'm going to be in anything other than maybe sometimes what I wear, maybe with a polo shirt. So.
Absolutely. We were talking about before we got started your team.
Yeah.
And obviously I think you said you're between like 45 and 50 people, which is a massive operation, especially when we're talking about in the real estate space where it's basically like a lot of mini entrepreneurs. They're almost like a lot of mini business owners. So how do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis and balance all these different personalities?
Yeah.
And I'm sure 95% of them are just like full-on go-getters on 24/7.
And so I think one thing that separates us is that our goal is to find people that want to be salespeople. Okay. So don't necessarily want to make the brand about themselves. And so that they can plug into an existing model. They can have the leads generated for them. They can have a team of support people to do all the as much of the administrative work as we can. They just want lead generation. They want to sell, right? And so the agent that wants to, to be the face and all those things that typically our industry is probably one of the most egomaniacal, even if that's a word, it's an industry with a lot of ego. Like everyone wants their face on the sign, and that's actually not going to work for us because the money that I've invested in putting my face out there is going to trump anything they could do to put theirs. We'll get more impressions from putting my face over and over again on stuff.
You're better off to go along
than they
and
would.
Get along.
Right. So for us, like some of those agents aren't necessarily the right fit for us. But we also find that sometimes agents will start off slow and then turn into great agents. And then sometimes they'll be great from the start. Everyone learns at a different pace, but certainly it can be an obstacle because you'll have people that are salespeople trying to get along with other salespeople. They can butt heads. They can go after the same lead. And so, we really vet that out in the interview process to find people that are going to be good team players. No different than, like a professional sports team, people have their role. We're looking to hire people to specific roles.
Wow. That's incredible that you say that because I wouldn't have expected that answer, frankly. So for me, like I would have thought hiring in a real estate organization, you want all of these like alphas, like going at it. What I found, almost want like A minus kind of people.
So I wouldn't rate them by a grade, but
you get what I'm going with.
But what I would say is that, if you look at I'm a big basketball guy. You look at Team USA this year. Team USA probably took 7 of the best NBA players in the world, and the other 5 were legit role players that were like not the best player on their team, right? And I think that's ideally what you need to have. And so in our organization, of course, we have some alphas. Of course, we have some of our top agents, but we also need some people that, that work well with other types of people. The real estate industry, unfortunately, does have that stigma that when you're like a really pushy, like hard closed salesperson, you're going to rub some people the wrong way. They're not going to want to work with you. So you do need some people that will offer more of a softer, sympathetic approach that aren't necessarily all like gung ho, because otherwise, the certain personality types will get offended and not want to work with that person. So you really do kind of have to have a mesh of society in a team of my size where you kind of have something for everyone.
How do you deal with those, kind of top agents and things like that? Because obviously, they have more options out there in the real estate space.
Of course.
And from my understanding, it's kind of easier to jump around where, in comparison to most industries.
Yep. A lot of people jump around. Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. So I find it interesting because I think a lot of times when people jump around, and again, we certainly do attract people that leave other brokerages, but oftentimes it's a mentality where they want to blame where they were instead of taking the action that they needed to take. Like, so for us, when we look at an agent in terms of like keeping them, we want to keep providing opportunity. So I want to provide the resources that I have to allow them to do something they couldn't do on their own. So for example, some of my agents will work with buyers, and then they'll eventually work with sellers, and then they'll eventually work with luxury people, and then they'll eventually work on development, or they'll work on our flip division. So I flip a lot of real estate too. So I have partners that are agents of mine that partner in those purchases and resales. So for me, there's like an escalation where you have enough opportunities for them to move up and kind of grow in the organization with more opportunity and more income. And of course, at some point they get to the end where, you know what, maybe it is time for them to go do their own thing. If I look at like the top agents in Tampa, called the top 100, a lot of those have worked for me at one point. And I'm proud of that, right? That was part of my move to the cloud-based brokerage that I made a year ago, was that that company, because of its structure, allows that if someone leaves my team, I still earn compensation from them as they grow. So that was one of the, I would say, flaws in my prior company's model, is that if I had someone that I spent years building up and then they got to a point where they left and they went on their own, I get nothing out of that, except maybe an occasional referral, or, I'm certainly happy to have other people be successful, but certainly if I'm trying to build the best real estate model for my business, monetizing someone that decides to go run their own business within the brokerage that you don't own, but you're a sponsor for, you continue a revenue stream from that.
Do you think that's where things are going to go? Because yes. I definitely...
Cloud-based brokerages are going to own the game. In 5 years, the companies that we know of today that are like at the top that aren't cloud-based brokerages, they're all in trouble. They're dinosaurs. They're just not evolving enough. They're not advancing enough with technology. They're the old antiquated systems that they use. I mean, I'm not going to name the company I was with. It's not hard to figure out the company that I was with before, because I don't believe in like saying negative about other people. I'm always just a pro, myself. But I will say that the systems that they use, because they haven't evolved, they're like old school, and I think old school in real estate worked for a really long time, but now it's just changed. The game has changed dramatically for real estate. So I think cloud-based brokerages that offer agents, influencers, top people more than just their commission, but other ways to either earn shares in the company, other revenue, things like that, are just the way it's going.
My mind's just turning right now, because I mean, it's the biggest, obviously, fear in any business is the grooming process, meaning that you groom this rock star
and then they leave.
So yeah.
And that is essentially what I experienced over the last 20 years. I would groom people and then they'd go do their own thing. And certainly I'm rooting for them because I don't want to hold anyone back. But now the models that are coming along,
you have an additional incentive though now.
Correct. Yeah. Now I want to continue helping them do well, because I still have a trail from forever. As long as they're there and I'm there at that company, I keep earning something from that. So to me, I think that's the kind of the wave of the future. And that's really what's happened. If you look, even in a not great real estate market, the companies that have grown are those companies, are the cloud-based, while the other companies are retreating and losing agents. Those cloud-based companies that can scale on a better level from a tech perspective are the ones that are winning right now.
My mind's still spinning with this. I'm just thinking about all the possibilities, and you started talking about influencers and this and that. It's like it's incredible how just real estate's developed, and that's not really talked about very much. So I appreciate you definitely bringing that to light. You said that I keep referring back to those first 10 years, because obviously they were so foundational in your career. Yeah. One question, and obviously definitely on a personal level, my wife will love that I asked this. How did you unplug?
Oh, it was hard.
How did you figure out that?
It was definitely hard.
I hate work-life balance. I'm just going to say that word, but how did you take your time?
I think first I failed at that for a long time, made a lot of mistakes. And I would say that at some point, I just had to shut it down and not work weekends. And that's where I am today. Like today, I really don't work weekends. I might, check email on Sunday night or a little bit.
And that's a busy time for agents.
But I don't. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a lot of people that work for me. They work weekends. But for me personally, I think that's where it got to. I also think that I found that because real estate's so entrepreneurial and there's so many other pillars to it, that as I would maybe lose enthusiasm in one side of the business, I can plug into other sides of the business. But from a balance perspective, like you said, for me, it's being conscientious to shut it down, turn off the phone, stop paying attention, do other things. I'm a big believer in time blocking. So like I like to keep my schedule to where I do certain things during certain times. And I also, one other thing that I think is also cool is I don't get notifications on my phone. My phone has no notifications. Wow. I don't even get notified if somebody texts me. The only thing that happens if someone calls me, but text messages, DMs, someone likes something on Instagram. What I found was that it made it impossible for me to ever stop because I was constantly getting interrupted. And I also found it to be completely counterproductive because I would be trying to work with a client or do something important or work on marketing and then ping and ding and the president said this or somebody tweeted that. And then it's all you're doing is constantly dealing with distractions. So I found I think again, our phones are incredible things for our life. They give you a business in the palm of your hand, but I also think it can be our own worst enemy. So for me, I don't have notifications on my phone. I'm unafraid on Friday night if I'm going to go do something to turn my phone off. And that took time. It definitely took time because I think we get addicted to our devices. And so for me, the no notifications is a game changer. And so it doesn't mean that I don't get those things. It just means those things, I look at Twitter or the news or get my text messages or check my email on my time instead of on that particular app's, time to suck me back in.
Did you create any type of backup plan or systems or anything that where it was maybe you had a personal assistant that was also looking at your emails and stuff like that? So you created those systems as well. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So sweetie, there's an end in sight. I promise.
Yes, yeah.
No, just kidding.
No, and what I would say is that
I'm 7 years in, so and I love the hustle, and she gets it. I mean, she's
I
amazing.
think again, those early years when you're building the foundation, it's you have to have a partner that gets that and understands, because I think when you're building it, they have to understand the end game, right? They have to know what your vision is and what you're trying to get to. It's not like you desire to do that all the way to 70. You want to do that to get to a point where then you can still enjoy. No one wants to work their whole life and get to 70 and then say, oh, now I get to enjoy it. You can barely walk, right? So for me, there was always kind of a vision of I want to get to a certain place where I have a quality of life because of all the sacrifices I make now. And now I'm at that place, fortunately. I could stop working now. I don't have to anymore. I'm doing it for love and for a variety of other reasons and helping other people. And but the phone balance thing, I think as technology evolved, has become an addiction for a lot of people. Oh, absolutely. So I literally have to shut that down sometimes. And so the no notifications for me was probably that point where I realized that helped give me balance. And of course, having a team and other people and support system helps too.
I'm not Andrew Huberman or anything like that, although I am a fan. And I'm curious to see the studies between dopamine and phone use. Yeah. Because I'm sure it's off the charts between the pinging and the attention and the notifications and everything.
It's like a little mini casino. So I said, all of mine are off. The only person that can interrupt that is my daughter. That is the only person that can get through that will notify me, or that even when my phone's on silent, my phone will ring if she calls me. And she knows not to if it's in the middle of the day, but my phone rings if she calls and that's it. Everyone else is silent, literally. It's just, and it's peaceful. I can literally turn it off and go, watch a TV show or, go to the movies or whatever. And again, I found myself when I do need to be focused on something so much more productive and engaged versus just constantly looking down and being distracted.
I started doing probably in the last couple of months block timing as well.
Yeah.
Where I'm and that, to your point where it was creating that's what I wanted to be able to do, because it's, as the saying goes, you either work in your business or on your business.
Correct.
So eventually you get to the point where you have to hire these people to take on these tasks, and your time, is so valuable at this point. If you, just because you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean you don't have an hourly rate. So if it's if I'm doing this,
what am I losing? What am I losing over here?
Cost could be massive.
And I think where my business is today, obviously the real estate market has been challenging the last couple of years. And I've spent, I'm definitely doing more in my business than I have in the last few years, mostly because I realized how, with all the changes in the industry, how much people really needed the right sales training. Because when the real estate market was hot, literally anybody could sell a house. Everyone was a real estate agent.
And they did.
And that, I mean, that was it, right? But when it changes, you've got to have the right people and you got to have the right coaching and training. And I realized, like, if my business was going to keep being successful, I had to go back and do things like I did, like post Great Recession. I had to step back into some meetings and some roles.
So you were looking back to like 08, 09 type
Probably,
stuff.
I would say post Great Recession.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
it's
10, 11, 12, yeah,
okay.
which were still like not great years. And again, I'm not saying that our real estate market is on par with that, because it's nowhere near that bad. But there are some trends that are comparable. There is a reduction in the number of transactions happening and homes available for sale. It's harder for people to qualify because of higher rates. So it just took, you had to be a better salesperson to be able to sell real estate when it's harder to make a sale happen. So I realized my people were lacking in that. So I've reinserted myself through the 20 years I've been doing it into different places in the business, depending on where I felt like it was weak.
Were you, because you've had this experience, selling houses through 2008 and afterwards and things like that. When you saw COVID happen, obviously it was an incredible time, in real estate, and a lot of people did very, very well. Did you take the position, not really necessarily the position, but did you educate your people and being like, listen, everybody, this is an amazing time. Keep hustling, keep your heads down, but this isn't forever.
Correct. Yeah. And we did the same thing. So, that's what I told everybody: when it rains, make hay, like light it up, go do your thing, but this is not normal. So like, you're going to literally be an order taker, like in some instances, that's what some agents were. They were order takers. And of course, some of those people didn't make it. Some of those people made a bunch of money, and then when the market turned, didn't know what it took to be successful. And that was kind of, like I said, like when I reinserted myself into some stuff. And so when COVID first happened, I thought, oh no, like this is going to be really bad. And then as stuff started happening, it was like, wait a second,
I live in Florida.
This is everyone's moving here. This is perfectly fine. Like, increase the advertising budget,
Tampa's the number one market in Florida,
right,
next to South Florida. This is great.
So and similarly, I had another time back probably in like 14, 15, we had an enormous hedge fund come to us. And this hedge fund said, hey, look, we want to work with you guys because you're, the top listing agent in the area. And we were literally doing probably 50, 60 transactions a month just with this hedge fund. Like, we were doing massive amounts of commissions. I had some of my agents do 100 homes that year, and they thought that they literally thought that they were like king of the world because they did 100 homes that year. And it was like, man, you're an order taker. You filled out stuff on a spreadsheet. Like, this is not reality. This is fantasy land. Make it happen.
Do it. Yeah.
But plan and prepare.
Yeah.
Don't blow all this money. There were a lot of people that blew all the money. That didn't live smartly, and then didn't adapt when it reset a year later, when those hedge funds said, oh, we're done buying now. Now it's like, okay, you got to reinvent yourself. You got to go back to doing what you're doing before. So I would say the hedge fund boom that we got in COVID were both times where a lot of agents didn't make it post that because they had bad habits that were only really relevant for that market.
Do you have those conversations with your agents or pull people aside? And it sounds like you do.
Yes.
Because you see it on Instagram a lot, and shout out to all the homies that love everybody. But, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got my real estate license. 6 months later, you got that C-class. You're living.
Yes,
and then you got that suit, and then you're wearing the Louis Vuitton loafers.
And there's a lot, I'm telling you, there are a lot of people that I think, and again, similarly, like I told you, my first
Rolex.
Right. My first 10 years, I still to this day have never bought a Rolex. I don't even have one. Like, it's just not my thing, right? But I have 10 cars, so it's like I make up for it, right?
We all have our vices.
But nonetheless, there are a lot of agents that do that. They get that first commission check and they go and blow it. So I'm always telling people, like, look, be smart about it. Like, reinvest, put some away. Like, this may not happen forever. You might have a dry month, and sometimes they spend so much that when they hit that dry spell, and then they're toast. The real estate industry has by far the highest exit of any industry in the first couple of years. It is literally like more than half of the real estate agents that get their license aren't still full-time active in 2 years. So, and it's because that they'll go get a $20,000 check and then think, oh, this is normal. So we coach people. We've done some financial consulting. We've brought in other companies to do coaching and consulting, because I tell them, I'm like, look, that's great, but start celebrating when you've got a couple of years of that piled up. Put some of that away for when you have a dry month or two, or else when you hit the dry month or two, you're going to break. So definitely like keeping a budget and being smart about it.
One of my good friends, I had him on a couple episodes ago, and he was talking about, he manages skateboarders, and he was talking about when he's managing these guys about making sure that they don't scale their lifestyles too quickly.
Correct.
And a lot of people fall into that trap.
Yeah.
Especially with the social media.
Well, like I told you, like obviously people look at my lifestyle now and they're like, oh, I want to get that in year 1. It's like, brother, I'm in year 20. It was year 15 before I had an exotic car.
And I have multiple sections of
correct.
my company.
Like I've built this out and invested and saved and done all these and made all these good choices. But I think you're right. I think people want it too fast today. They don't want to stay consistent. They want it to happen too quick. And unfortunately, some of them end up failing out because they try and keep up. Like you said, they scale up their lifestyle. In fact, I had one of our mortgage lenders on my radio show recently, and he was talking about doing mortgages for athletes and entertainers and social media personalities. In fact, he had one person recently that they did a loan for that was making $500,000 a year selling pictures of her feet. Like wildly successful. And
respect.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like I'll put my feet out there. Yeah. They're horrible. You don't want to see them. No, but
I'll take 50 a year. Like you don't even I ain't greedy.
Yeah. So the funny part is that he was saying this, and like apparently like the credit is trash. They're just not making smart financial decisions, and they're overextending themselves. They're buying stuff to kind of, and then the problem is like you get stuck having to keep working at a level that maybe you don't want to work because you bought stuff to impress other people, not because you really cared about it.
Gary Vee talks about that all the time. It's, don't buy stuff to impress people that you don't
really
even
care
about.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you're a great example of, you were talking about earlier in the episode, driving the BMW and just, wearing the suit, but, I'm sure you're not buying Brioni suits or something, crazy back then anyway.
Correct.
And you were doing deals.
Yeah.
And you were making it happen.
Yep.
Because you concentrated on the sales and you had the knowledge and had the information people wanted.
Yep. And I was persistent. Yeah. They could tell that I cared. I worked hard. I was well scripted.
Talk about the follow up there. Talk about that for a minute.
So I've always said that like I believe the best real estate salespeople that are the most successful think of leads. There's one of two outcomes. They're either going to sell them a home or they're going to die. That literally, like if you have that mentality and you go into real estate and you just stay in touch with people, you will eventually win out so much business because other people will just be hit it and quit it. They'll call them 3 times, and then when the person doesn't do anything, then they move on and then they call the next realtor. But if you stay consistent with your communication with your leads, you'll be massively successful. It's not rocket science. It's just persistence. And so you win simply by doing what other people aren't likely going to do. So yeah, I'm a big believer in persistence and follow up. You've got to have tools. And I think today it's wild because now there's so much AI opportunity. Like now it's almost like replacing salespeople in some ways where it used to be you'd have to make a certain number of dials every day. Now it's like, oh, I don't have to make as many because there's going to be some AI follow-up calls and text messages that are going to help me, convert the business more than just me doing it on the phone. But back then it was old school. It was you're making phone calls.
What do you tell somebody? This is kind of a more pointed question. Yeah. So like if somebody says, hey, my house is, I'm selling a $2 million house, or they think their house is worth $2 million. And you're like, this is a $1.5 million house. Like, how do you deal with those just like significant disagreements or just misunderstandings?
I think the way that we like to explain price, and I'm coaching my agents a lot on this right now because our market did change. Everything was going up, and you could probably ask a Fantasyland number and you were going to get it. So I like to explain price 3 ways. You have 3 choices to price a house. You can price it aggressive to create a bidding war, maybe slightly below market. You can price it at market, in which case it's going to take 50, 60, 70 days to sell. You're going to probably get an offer lower than asking. And then you can price it above the market, and you're eventually going to chase the market down. You're going to keep reducing it, and either it's not going to sell or you're going to get lowballed because of how long it sits on the market. Which one of those processes sounds right for you? And then I show them the comparables. And the idea is that if they, whichever one they commit to, they're rarely committing to the high priced one, right? They're almost always saying, well, I'd love to get a bidding war. Or I don't want to sit on it forever. No one ever says, yeah, I'd like to have my house sit on that market for a year, right? So when they commit to one of those two, to me, it's very collaborative. I want to show them comparable homes and then point out things like, well, you mentioned, well, looking at this home, what do you think your home is worth compared to this one? It has these features, yours has this, and then the number comes from them. So my goal is to guide them with the data and the comparables to where they pick the price based on which, and then of course, if they say, well, I see this one for 400, but I want to sell mine for 500. Well, you mentioned before that you want to actually sell your house. It sounds like you're going the path where it's probably just going to sit on the market. And so I think you've just got to be collaborative. You've got to consult them to keep going back to the data, because the agent isn't the one that sets the price that sells that. The market does that. The agent is simply just doing its job to market the property as best they can and get as many eyes on it. The higher the price above market, the less eyes it's going to get, and the likelihood of it selling is slim. So when you explain it that way, you also have to try and get to what their end goal is. We'll have people say, well, I need 500 out of my $400,000 house so I can go out and buy the million. Well, when your 400 goes to 500, what do you think the million one's going to do? Like if you're going to wait for 25% appreciation, the million's going to be 1.2. You just lost 100 grand. So it's getting them to see that they're not in a vacuum, looking bigger picture at it.
Building upon that, what would you recommend if you're dealing with a less experienced agent on the other side?
Yeah. So you're basically doing their job for them in many instances. You're having to point those things out to them, share the comps with them, obviously share your experience, but you've got to do it in a way where you're not like trying to big dog them. You're not like, hey, have you looked up my stats before? You're trying to guide them and say, look, I want to do a deal with you. And, I want to work together, and I'm going to share with you like why we're positioned this way so that you can share it with your client. Sometimes also too, like, especially in a negotiation, if you're far off, you certainly want to represent your client. And, if you're trying to get them to see something, you almost want to make it part of the contract in a way so that it actually gets to the consumer. So one example would be like, if you're sending comps to support your offer and you just send the comps and then you send the contract, the agent isn't going to send those comps to the client because the comps make them look like they're an idiot for pricing it at the stupid number they priced it at. So I would literally add it to the additional terms, see attached comparable sales, see attached, documents, like to make sure the customer's like, well, wait a second, where are these documents at? And then the customer, hopefully you can then weed through the inexperience of the agent to get to the customer to try and make a deal happen.
Where do you see the real estate market going in the next 5 years? Yeah,
like I mentioned it earlier, the cloud-based brokerages, I think, are where things are going to be. I think that you're going to see a reduction in the number of agents.
I was going to say that. Do you think because of the cloud-based system, do you think that itself will reduce agents or just the market itself?
I think the market itself, I think some of the changes in the industry is going to reduce the number of agents. I also think that because of some of the pressures from different things in the industry, you're seeing a more professionalization of real estate. And I think that trend is going to continue, which is going to cause people that maybe aren't producing to pursue something else. And so I think there will be a drop in the number of agents. I also think like the companies like mine and that are heavy advertisers, they're big teams, they're actually going to grow. They're going to benefit because more and more people are going to say, I can't do this on my own. This is harder than it used to be. I need help. I need support. I need marketing. And I tend to also believe that there'll be more disruption. So things like, like the lockbox system, for example, I have a hard time believing people are going to be hanging things on the door. I think we're all going to have smart locks. You're going to have smart locks where somebody can just come up and put in a code. You don't need a lockbox. So I think there'll be some tech involvement, more and more video, 3D tours, things like that. I think there'll be more and more homes sold sight unseen.
Okay.
With the technology available today for people to literally like walk through it virtually. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of disruption coming, but a reduction in agent count, no doubt leads it for me. I think there's no question that's already underway.
One of the big social media trends that I see these days, and a lot of videos or a lot of, we'll call them courses or content or whatever you want to call it, is on wholesaling.
Right.
Can you talk to people about the issues with wholesaling? Because nobody ever answers, and I'll kind of show you where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Nobody ever answers the age-old question of, what if I can't wholesale the house?
Right. Well, so here's what I would tell you. So I personally buy homes from wholesalers. I have some that are friends. They're a resource for me to buy homes, to renovate and resell and improve a neighborhood. So I'm not a hater of wholesaling. Like I said, I work with wholesalers. What I would say is because of the proliferation of the courses, it is taking the industry back to where you have a lot of people that don't really know what they're doing. And so we're regularly getting clients coming to us and saying, hey, we want you to buy our house, but we've already got it under contract. Well, hey, okay, well, who's it under contract with? Well, we've been under contract for like 90 days and, it's like, and we have there's a $200 escrow deposit. I was like, okay, that sounds like a red flag. Like that's a wholesaler, right? They're wanting to tie up the property and then find an end buyer to profit. So certainly that's the wholesaler's protection. They're going to negotiate terms that make it a lot easier for them to find an end buyer and then flip the paper for a profit with a minimal escrow amount, right? So from a consumer's perspective, if you want to kind of vet out whether the person's really buying the house or not, the escrow deposit is one, how quickly it's going to close is another, and of course the assignability portion of the contract is the other. But if the wholesaler can't find a buyer, they're just going to walk. And there's really not a lot of remedy you have because a lot of them don't have assets. If they had assets, they'd probably make more money buying that house at the contract they have it at, renovating it and reselling it. I know because I do that. But they don't have the capital, so they want to turn and sell the paper. And when they can't find an end buyer, or they were not properly educated on how to price a home or how to understand the renovation costs, and they can't find a buyer, they just simply walk. And then the seller can keep their $200 for locking a property up for 90 days. So there's a lot of sellers that get taken advantage of. But like I said, there are some wholesalers that run great operations that don't operate that way, that buy a lot of foreclosure stuff. The wholesalers definitely give a black eye to the real estate industry, at least the inexperienced ones. The professional ones, like I said, a lot of friends that do it. If everyone did it like they did, there wouldn't be as many of the problems as there are.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you brought up, because I was talking about, more like, hey, it's scary if you're getting into the wholesaling business and you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
But you've identified, obviously, there could be, potential issues with the people that are getting in these contracts with these wholesalers that don't know what they're doing.
And the wholesale, and what I would say is the wholesalers not knowing what they're doing, they don't really have a ton of risk. If they're not real estate licensed,
of course, yeah.
If they're not real estate licensed and they're putting up a small amount of escrow, there's really not a lot of remedy. I mean, you could attempt to try and sue them, but if they don't have assets, there really isn't a lot to pursue, right? I mean, they're not collectible.
Yeah,
so
cool.
So who's really going to pick that up and say, yeah, let me sue this wholesaler that walked on my contract for 90 days. That's why I tell people all the time, like, look, before you sell your house to somebody that's come off an ad or that, knocked on your door, like, have a couple people look at it. Have us look at it. We'll tell you like what the deal is, like whether it's legitimate or not legitimate. Because there are plenty of people that make legitimate cash offers, buy and close on properties. There are
tons of people.
Of them. So like if it's one of those, great. If it's not one of those, then you're in for some trouble in a lot of instances.
What are your suggestions for new agents? I know that's kind of a wide range and stuff like that. Somebody's like, either I'm interested in getting my real estate license, or I've gotten my real estate license.
So I love new agents and I love them joining my team, mostly because I think number one, they need lead generation. They don't know, because it's a struggle for people to move into the industry.
Let me break that down. Yeah. So you're quite, again, throwing curveballs at me, man, which I love. My thought process would be like, hey, new agents, we're going to teach you how to sell. Go hit the pavement. You're like, no.
Yeah.
It sounds like because
we'll
you're
generate
creating,
lease. Correct.
Well, yeah, because you're creating longevity.
Correct.
It's like, we don't want you. We want you here.
Here's the other thing. Like the agents that have been around for a long time and jumped company every 7 months or changing companies, kind of the hit it or quit it agents. The downside with having a lot of those, you're just having constant turnover and problems, and they have bad habits, right? And so they don't necessarily ever stay anywhere long enough to really see what the company really offers. So for us, we love new agents because they don't have as many of the bad habits, are a lot more coachable to sell the way that we sell. But it's also because when you do get into real estate, there's so much you have to learn. Not only do you have to learn how to be a salesperson, you have to learn how to be a marketer. You have to learn the contract. You have to learn all of these intricate steps. And so we take some of those steps off of you so you can focus on, okay, how you're learning the contract and learning selling. You don't have to worry about the leads. You don't have to worry about the transaction itself. We got somebody that'll handle that. No different than like an attorney having a paralegal, right? So for us, like, we like new agents from that perspective, but they've got to have a hunger. They got to have drive. They've got to be coachable.
Oh, they got to have the qualities.
And if they're coachable, then yeah, I love new agents. I think joining a team is probably the right place for most new agents. The failure rate is so high because they'll get attracted to somewhere and say, oh, I make 100% of the commission. I'm going to go there because it doesn't cost me anything.
I just pay a transaction fee. Like
you're going to do 3 deals. Congratulations. Go work at Walmart. You'll make more money. Like literally, like if you look at the companies that do that, that's the average productivity per agent because they're not really giving you any tools or training. They don't have a vested interest in your success. They're not going to spend time coaching you because if they were really any good, they'd be out doing a lot. They'd be doing more, right? So the reality is most of those companies, in my opinion, cause a high failure rate because people will go and say, oh, this is cheaper, but you get what you pay for. I always say my country roots in Indiana always say cheap work ain't good and good work ain't cheap. And that's what you get. If you're going to go the cheap place, you better have a system for generating leads or you better be a phone animal or somebody that's knocking on doors. Because if you don't have that down, then you're going to go somewhere and likely not make it. Whereas if you go into a team, you're getting some of that stuff taken off your plate and you have the ability to benefit from the brand it's built and the leads and the database and the things that they generate.
It's so important, and I think people forget about that in not only real estate, but a wide variety of businesses to create that foundation within their employees because and that's where you see the organizations that really succeed and the organizations that don't do so well. Yeah. When you just throw them, for lack of better terms, throw them in the deep end of the pool and see if they swim or not, 9 times out of 10, they're probably not.
Correct.
And especially the case in real estate.
And I think now there's so much tech too that's going to help us, call recording and AI analysis of a phone call and all these things that you can do to help an agent get better. We literally have a system where our agents can do a presentation to an AI avatar and then get it evaluated and literally score them, right? So to me, there's so if the person's willing to invest time in getting better is a big factor. I think the other thing that I would say about the new agent versus the experienced agent, the new agent doesn't know any better. They don't have any of the, like I mentioned, the bad habits. They don't have that. So you can kind of mold them. And then I think there's certainly a loyalty. Our new agents that join us that are brand new agents stick longer. And I'm a believer that you can learn no matter what industry. I would probably say that even in your industry, the person that is the best legal scholar that knows the law the most is probably not the most successful attorney. The most successful attorney is the one that knows how to generate the business. And for me, when I started getting aggressive with advertising, I would meet people and they'd talk to me about complicated real estate things. I was like, man, I don't know what they know more about real estate than I do, but I know how to market better than they do.
I'm going to say this as humbly as possible. It's you'll talk to somebody in my business. It'll be like, oh, I have this massive, appellate issue and this and that and going in all these things. And I'm talking and I'm like, cool, man. I brought in 40 cases last month. So, I'm happy for you.
Right.
Now, and I say that humbly, but it's
but in reality, cool. It's again, like you said, it's the person that can generate the business that's going to survive the person. And it's not as if the person that's super bright about the specifics or the intricacies of the law or of real estate can't be successful, but they have to figure out a way to get people to reach out to them. If they don't do that, then it doesn't matter how much knowledge they have.
And learning how to be a real person. Yeah. Learning how to be genuine. And I think, I want to end with that. I think a lot of people forget that in sales is they're so busy trying to close the sale and trying to memorize the script and trying to do all that. It's have you ever started a phone call and just or even
hey, how's it going? Right.
Yeah. How are you?
And we certainly teach what we call structure of a call. So it's kind of what you want to accomplish in a phone call. But what I would say is be a human, right? People naturally can tell when someone has commission breath. If you have commission breath and you're just, it doesn't seem like you're adding value. It doesn't seem like you're bringing anything to the table. The customer can feel that. So you've got to come up with an approach where you still get what you want out of a call, but you've got to, like you said, you've got to be genuine. You've got to show care and concern for helping them accomplish their goals.
I'm speechless right now. I can't thank you enough for the time and the knowledge today. Yeah. The real estate market is definitely changing. The industry is definitely changing. And I think we're going to see a lot of, a lot of wonderful things over the next couple of years. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
And as we always say, it is not an accident that Andrew Duncan is as successful as he is. And man, we'll see you next time. Appreciate you.
Thank you.